Yeah, please.
So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this insightful conversation with Mr. Kirin Chopra. The entire startup ecosystem in India has been accelerated in the last year, and our talent are creating SaaS and TaaS models that are drawing global and national eyeballs and investor interest across sectors. With liquidity at a high rate and interest at a low, India has emerged as one of the leading startup ecosystems in the world, and the pace of adding unicorns is unprecedented. So much so that our stock exchange have evolved to even list startups which defy conventional investment strategy. In this background, we are very privileged and fortunate to have Mr. Kirin Chopra amongst us to talk about business ideation and presenting a business idea. It's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Mr. Kirin Chopra to all of you. Mr. Chopra is a first-generation entrepreneur with his entire schooling in Lucknow, a science graduate from the University of Lucknow, a qualified rubber technologist from the National College of Rubber Technology, London, and a graduate of London Metropolitan University and the Plastics and Rubber Institute of the UK. He is the chairman and managing director of an Indo German Joint Venture based in Lucknow, Chopra Retec Rubber Products Limited, which is an ISO 9001 certified CRISIL, SMERA, and Dun and Bradstreet rated recognized export house, 100% export oriented manufacturer of niche automotive parts, which are exported to every continent in the world, including the world's largest automotive market by sales, China. He has traveled globally in connection with business and exports. He has been also nominated to the Prime Minister's Task Force panel for MSME. He was chairman of CII's UP Council in 2004 and 5. He is presently a member of the National and Northern Region Council of CII, besides the UP State Council. He has also headed various panels at CII, regionally and nationally, on infrastructure, export, MSMEs, membership, etc. He has been a member of the Indo German Chamber of Commerce for over 2 decades, besides the Chemical and Engineering Export Promotions Council. He has also been a member of the Managing Committee of Jaipur School, Lucknow, and a member of various professional and social clubs and associations in the city of Lucknow. He is also on the Managing Committee of Vivekananda Polyclinic Institute of Medical Sciences. He is a founder member of Hope and president of Hope Initiative, an NGO which promotes health through schools and colleges, and Global Lucknow, which endeavors to promote and connect Lucknow's culture with other global cultures. You will be surprised and pleased to know that he is definitely a very voracious reader, a blogger, also writes for various causes as well as for fun, and is also a part of an amateur theatre group, which has been a part of recent web series and enjoys the outdoor and almost every kind of sport. So definitely, sir, we are going to ask you about this web series experience also. But first of all, welcome to this dialogue.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. It's always a pleasure and privilege to interact with young minds, and it always is a two-way process. We share each other's experiences and we learn from each other. So it is always a pleasure, and likewise this time also, I hope we'll complete this journey of learning once we are through with this session, and I'm sure we'll be enriched both ways.
Yes. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you for coming here. The first question, as I have discussed in the background also, is that the growth in the number of unicorns is increasing exponentially. From 10 unicorns in 2018 to 11 in 2020, we have seen 40 unicorns in 2021, and still the last week of December is still there. The first thing you would like to know is what is changing in India per se, which is otherwise a sort of career-oriented company. And I would like to mention a very funny meme which was there when Mr. Parag Agrawal became the CEO of Twitter, that Indian moms were discussing that even this is not a better opportunity than a government job. So from that mindset, where everybody wanted to become a government servant to then a servant in the private sector, now we are seeing the unicorns and startup system. So what do you think has changed in the Indian society and Indian culture per se?
Well, thank you, Dr. Sharma. Great question. But let me set the context, in view of what has happened in the last almost 2 years, little less than 2 years, since the pandemic broke out and we were all exposed to a lot of the uncertainties that we all went through, in fact. Essentially, what has changed is the compression and use of technology and digitization. We have compressed what would have been a 5-year, 6-year phenomenon into a 2-year cycle. In this 2 years, we have created a digital environment which was probably unthinkable before the pandemic broke out. So to sum it up in a few words as to what has changed, well, number one, geography has become history. We are sitting in our rooms and connecting with the rest of the world. We have learned to do this better. Science fiction is becoming a reality. Everything we thought was fiction or science jargon is now becoming a reality. Number three, business is actually happening at the speed of thought. And number four, we cannot exist in isolation anymore because change is the only constant. And this sort of summarizes, what has transformed in the last few months. And the startup space in particular, you mentioned 40 unicorns. Well, the count is increasing every week, and now we have 43 already. So this number has happened in the last maybe less than a year, whereas it took us several years to reach the first 30. So that transformation is very obvious. It is on account of the huge inflow of digital in all parts of our lives, in every aspect of our life. So let me talk about what a startup is really. A startup basically is an innovation to disrupt, or transform the way something is being done, already being done. So be it a product or a service. Now, the trigger for that creation of this spurt of huge innovation can be attributed to the pandemic, as I mentioned, which created so many challenges around the world. Whether it was medical and healthcare solutions like masks, sanitizers, gloves, PPE kits, syringes, medicines, vaccines, online education, and even business communication, even mobility, or so many other similar challenging situations that had emerged during the pandemic. So this was further catalyzed by countries pumping in money, as you just mentioned, in their respective economies, which created surplus and abundant liquidity everywhere. I'm told the total amount of liquidity in the global economies is as much as $35 trillion. So these funds are now available for very enterprising startups that came up with very innovative product and service ideas. And added all of this to that was the SEBI's recent nod for startups, as you also mentioned, to be listed on our stock exchanges, which actually encouraged several loss-making startups to jump in to attract that available liquidity and have liquid cash to scale up and pivot further. So these are very positive side effects, like, when the startup ecosystem began to evolve, the side effects included unprecedented employment opportunities within the startup ecosystem, of course, higher salaries, very high campus placements, and shortage of special skill sets that were required to build the digital and cloud ecosystem worldwide. And more so, the entire IT fraternity was moving at a very frenetic pace to help create and upgrade digital solutions for clients worldwide. And this is happening as we talk, and this was to adapt to the new normal, which emerged month after month. And every month, we are course correcting to, do things differently. So obviously this led to a huge hiring and more job opportunities In fact, demand even today is more than supply, as you would know better than me.
Yes.
Yeah. So as for Parag Agarwal, well, it goes to his credit to have been chosen to head Twitter, and it is no mean feat. In fact, it is a message to the digital world that Indians are gradually becoming dominant in the technology-driven change globally. And as far as what mothers think, well, mothers want a 40-year career for their children. I think the startup industry is making billionaires for young startuppreneurs in a matter of 15, 20, 25 years, and they can retire much earlier than the specified retirement age and enjoy the fruits of all the labor they put in bringing up successful startups. So there you go. I mean, I feel the opportunity for young billionaires is here, and therefore government jobs will have to take a back seat.
Okay, wonderful. So digital technologies, pandemic, the mix of these two things have been one of the prominent reasons behind this spur in unicorns. One more question I will ask about the Indian society per se and the startup, and then we will come to the startup itself. That we have seen in the movies of 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s that all businessmen, people who are doing business, are projected as something evil. They would be villains, and they would be so in Indian society, the perception of people who do business is sort of related with that they would be corrupt, and that kind of mindset was there, and that's why also some people, I have listened to some people who would say, no, business is not a part of our family culture. In our family, you will do only a job. We cannot do business. There are only specific people and communities who can do business. And this thing is also now changing. And the identity of the businessman and the acceptance of the businessman and the startups and entrepreneurs is also changing in the Indian society. So do you also feel like that? And what could be the reason behind that?
Well, Dr. Sharma, it's not just India, but the entire world. You know, we've been seeing business models changing thanks to innovation. You know, despite a complete lockdown, the Indian businesses continue to provide products and services, be it food or entertainment or healthcare, uninterrupted. I mean, these services were uninterrupted. And our fast-track creation of vaccines and now administering them has drawn global appreciation. So our government's approach to keep businesses afloat through liquidity measures were also different from what developed economies did. You know, we had a very different approach to keeping our businesses in good shape. Of course, you know, certain businesses did suffer, but then, you know, everybody can't perform to the same level in a situation like this. So what we did differently was we focused on the supply side rather than just generating demand, you know, thus avoiding the pitfalls like huge long-term unemployment and inflation. So, of course, a lot of such decisions were on the go because it was a very dynamic situation. And we continue to exist in the unknown and the unpredictable situations that evolved as a result of the pandemic. So some decisions may have been knee-jerk, you could call them that, or even criticized, and rightly so. But after almost 2 years, we seem to have actually gotten back on our feet better than other global economies.
Yes, yes. So thank you for this answer also. Now I am talking like a student and like a common man also. So students or I would say almost everybody, if you talk to people, almost everybody would share a startup idea with you. Correct. And especially management students, I have seen that every trimester they get and they think of one startup idea. And sometimes they discuss it with their friends also. But ideation is there with almost everybody, but very few, I think minuscule minority people are able to execute that. So what are the, like, why most of the people are at the ideation stage only and not at execution stage? And what can we do at the ideation stage itself? How can we start thinking of the initial idea, how do we dissect it, how do we develop it so that we can start moving towards the execution idea?
Yes, I agree. You know, it's not easy to decipher the startup world because of the sheer dynamism and the continuous changing dynamics of the startup ecosystem. So what we have entered today is a super cycle of multiple new technology trends. So one must remember that users of your product or service, which you may, conceive as a startup idea, they do not care about your underlying technology choices. They're not concerned about what is the technology behind it. They're basically concerned about the product or service they are getting. So they are only concerned with how well you actually solve the problem for them. And whoever solves the problem best actually wins. So the fundamental principle behind a startup, or for that matter, any business idea, is the vision and the conviction based on the research that you do for that idea or product. It is better to spend more time in building that conviction based on knowledge that is freely available today, as we all know, for making a very solid start to your startup. Failure, of course, is the best teacher. Ask those who are successful today and they will tell you how sweet their success tasted after they faced a lot of failures. The success rate of startups, as you know, has gone up substantially. It was sub 5% at one stage. It is almost in the teens now, because a lot of the new startups are being mentored by those who have gone through this entire journey before. So mentoring is very key to any startup succeeding. Of course, learning from those who learned by making mistakes is actually like leapfrogging. You take several jumps ahead of the contemporary startup founders if you have taken the learning from existing startups. There are, of course, key elements for a startup to succeed and grow. And any startup must aim basically to solve a problem in a way that the solution is difficult to replicate. So that uniqueness in a startup is very essential. And also the startup idea or product or service possibly touches all sections of society and uses the right technology to give the customer a very competitive and satisfying experience. So customer experience is absolutely the key. The first mover advantage and rapid scaling makes it difficult for others to emulate. As an example, you know of Swiggy and Zomato. Yes. They are in the food delivery business. Now, why is it that apart from Swiggy and Zomato, you don't hear of a third name or a fourth name trying to get into that space? Because these two companies got into a space and had the first mover advantage, have created such a huge customer base that for any new startup to reach that level is going to be several years of burning money before they can even come close to that. And by that time, these two will be way ahead of the curve. So, yes, it's very important to have the first mover advantage. So to summarize what I just told you, to succeed as a startup, first of all, research your idea and the product very well. Build a very competent team who are all in this thought process that the founder has at 100% plus levels. And they should be ready to sacrifice everything for reaching the goals in the time that has been specified. Yes. And move very quickly to proof of concept stage. The proof of concept stage is very critical because the faster you reach there, then you start engaging with investors at early stages of growth, and you're ready to, course correct or pivot as you move along, because this is very critical. If your startup starts with a fundamental thought, idea, or product, and as you start moving, you learn more about the market, learn more about the customers, and you need to change certain things. So the ability to course correct or pivot, as they call it in the startup jargon, as you move along is very crucial. So the focus also always should be on customer experience and the profitability. I mean, profitability is something that you should not undermine, because just because, loss-making startups like Paytm and Zomato have listed, they are still not profitable, and I have no idea when they will be. Today, if you are profitable, you will be ahead of your competition in terms of investor interest.
Yes, yes. So research, speed, and ability to pivot. So from the initial idea which comes in a person's mind, these are the three key things which one should start doing quickly in order to go to the execution stage. Now, uh,
Absolutely.
you have discussed about developing conviction in the idea, and you have also discussed about mentoring in the startup ecosystem. But
Correct.
sometimes what people do is that they sort of try to hide their idea. They think that if they will discuss their idea with many people, somebody might copy their idea with resources also. So in with this kind of mindset, it becomes very difficult to find a good mentor, because if you're not talking about it, then people would not know about it. They will not be able to discuss this thing with you. And then if you start talking about it, there is always a fear at the back of the people's mind that somebody might copy their idea. So how does somebody find a good mentor for themselves at the ideation stage, and what kind of strategy one should apply while discussing their business idea with others?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, it's this psyche of the Indian business mindset that,
Yes.
divulging your business idea will probably get it hijacked in some
Mm,
form or the other. But
mm,
that's incorrect, because
mm,
today we're looking at a different world altogether. And if startups in thousands are coming out every day with different ideas and products, it's only because they are not scared to face the world with their idea. So it's
mm.
all about conviction. If you
Yes.
have done the necessary research and taken a really deep dive into the problem universe which you are solving, and you have the belief and conviction in the solution you are creating, not only will you be able to surge ahead, but you will also be able to express yourself convincingly to
Yes.
potential investors and foolproof your idea at a very early stage.
Mm,
So it's all about conviction. So of course,
mm,
legal options like IPR, copyrights, patents are also available today. You can always use those to protect your legal rights over the idea or the service that you are creating. And
mm,
they are always something you can resort to. So to safeguard your idea or product, you have these options. Of
mm,
course, self-belief. I mean, that is very crucial. Self-belief in your ability to achieve the goals that you have set for that product or service startup is very important. And conviction in your idea itself. And if you have that, that cannot prevent you from being ahead of competition, which will always be there. I mean, competition is not something you can rule away or wish away. But if you have done your research well, if you are convinced, if you have self-belief, and again, today we have so many opportunities through social media platforms. You can engage with mentors who are readily willing to share with at no cost really. I mean, they're people who have been through the startup journey and who like to see people, because they didn't get the kind of support that you are able to get today. They want to mentor and help, at least handhold for some part of the journey of a startup, so that they don't make the same mistakes that these startups make. And these mentors are always available. It's not that I have gone through this process. I have used social media platforms to connect with several people in the startup community, and they are always willing to help. So this is an opportunity. You should use social media platforms to reach out to people who are willing to handhold you and keep you on track with your journey of a startup.
yes. So, yes, social media is one aspect. LinkedIn, especially, can be definitely leveraged to reach out to
Absolutely.
mentors. Yes, in this. Uh, for we are talking a lot about conviction here, conviction and self belief in the idea. So, from your experience, is there a kind of, I don't know, a checklist or a matrix or some kind of thing which can be used by an individual to see that whether the idea which they are trying to develop is a good idea or a viable idea or not? So are there some questions which a person should ask themselves about their idea in order to build this conviction in self?
Yeah, there is definitely, the choice of an idea is very crucial. So it's a very strange and very dynamic world. Everything is changing so rapidly. So does, whatever you conceive today may not be in the same form 6 months or 1 year down the line. So, well, a good or viable idea can become bad also if you do not have the ability to pivot or course correct at the right time. I mean, that is very crucial. You remember, clones will come up very quickly.
Yes.
And you have to be constantly ahead of the curve. There will be competition, there will be people who will try to emulate your idea, but you have to move very quickly and stay ahead of the curve. The problem you are solving should have maximum touch points and scalable very, very quickly. These are very crucial aspects of a startup. That means that the problem that you are solving should have maximum touch points in the sense that the customer base must be very, very large and scalable very quickly, which means that it should be technology intensive and asset light. That means it should not require a lot of capital in terms of asset building, and it should be very technology intensive. So when you have technology as a key element of your startup, it becomes a tool that you can use to multiply the growth process that you are using, because technology is not something that anybody else can replicate if you have got checked all the boxes that are required to address customer experience. And even better, if it addresses a global problem. So if it is a global problem that you're solving, then you have a much larger market that you're looking at. So the world is your stage, and therefore your startup opportunities can become humongous. Again, constant research always helps to understand what your competition is doing and helps you stay ahead of the curve, as I just mentioned. So that research must not stop. You must keep a track of what is happening in the space that you have created your startup in. So there are no free lunches. Even after you have become successful, the journey continues to be arduous. So you have to be very vigilant, agile, and even a startup like Paytm, Vijay Shekhar Sharma, who incidentally is from UP, he almost went bankrupt 7 or 8 years ago, and he resurrected because he course corrected, he pivoted to a different model, and he was able to convince the investors to come back and invest in his startup. And today he has created history by being one of the biggest launches on the IPO market.
IPOs.
So yes, and again, if he doesn't course correct or pivot with time, there are a lot of fintechs in the market who will eat him up. So it's a matter of who survives this slugfest of being ahead of the curve.
So he's competing with giants like Google in terms of Google Pay also. So
yeah, and Indian companies, fintech companies in India are becoming startups. They're adopting technology just like startups are. I mean, you take the case of Bajaj Finance. Today, they're a fintech, but their primary tool is technology today. Yes. So they're not any different, except they are profitable and Paytm is not.
Yes. So for a good idea, 3 points you have given to us. One, it has to be technology intensive. Second, it has to be asset light in terms of asset. And third, that it should be solving a global problem. So it's a very good matrix which we have discussed here, and people can check their ideas on these 3 points. Coincidentally, the session which we are doing today is also at the time when the very famous startup pitch program Shark Tank has come to India, and it is being aired on Sony television. And in one of the previous answers, you have also discussed about expressing the idea to the investors. So from that point of view, what should one take care of when they are presenting their idea to maybe their mentors, to the prospective investors? And when they are presenting their idea, what are some of the things they should take care of? And is there a particular format or style in which they should be presenting their idea?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You see, what is happening in India is that the ecosystem is restricted to a few parts of the country. You can see perhaps the NCR, some parts of Karnataka, maybe Maharashtra. But tier 2 and tier 3 cities don't have an ecosystem for startups to develop in the sense that they should, which means the venture capital and private equity investors really don't focus on tier 2, tier 3 cities. So what Shark Tank platforms like Shark Tank will do is create an ecosystem where not only will startups understand the nuances of how to pitch and how to present their case for investment, but it will also encourage parents who watch this show to encourage their children to get into the startup space. Today, what is happening is, I'm digressing a little from your question, but I'll just leave the context before I get on to what a typical startup presentation should be. Basically, today parents do not understand, a lot of parents do not understand what a startup is when there is no revenue, there is a lot of hard work, and there is no outcome overnight. So they wonder what kind of business. I mean, a lot of tier 2, tier 3 cities have their children who have left very lucrative jobs to come back and start some startup idea on which they have a lot of conviction. But parents, if you ask them in general in tier 2, tier 3 cities, they want their child to be a government officer or a IAS officer, or take up a medical job, or a doctor, or some professional job, or a good job. I mean, basically they feel it's more secure to have a good qualification and a good job. But I do feel that the startup ecosystem is evolving. It is spreading to tier 2, tier 3 cities, and the programs like Shark Tank are going to actually add to the ecosystem gaps that have been created because of certain metros taking most of the interest of startups away. So this is perhaps, the most important part. What you spoke about, your question, is the most important part of a startup's journey. In fact, I don't know how many of you saw the first episode of Shark Tank, which was 2 days ago. So if you haven't, I'm sure it is on YouTube. It was on Sony TV, and they had about 76 odd startups vying for a 40 crore purse, which means almost 50 lakhs per startup. And that is a great idea in terms of promoting the startup ecosystem. So, well, a startup, once you have conceived the idea and created a pilot, or even a concept situation where you have you're ready to create what is called a deck or a pitch, and they used to call it the elevator pitch. Why the elevator pitch? Well, it is supposed to be the shortest, precise, and most convincing presentation you can convey to an investor for everything he's looking for as an investment opportunity. So whatever your pitch is, whatever your deck is, it should be short, it should be precise, and it should be most convincing as a presentation, and should actually convey to the investor in that very short period everything he is looking for as an investment opportunity. So if you have a very well-researched product or service, tried and tested idea, but are unable to put across the strengths of the same in a couple of minutes, chances are that the investor will move on. Because do not forget that, all these investors, they have to go through hundreds of ideas each day. And since there is no dearth of creative and entrepreneurial ideas floating around, they need to see substance in whatever you are doing. So your pitch has to be honest. These are key aspects of, what your pitch must have. One is honesty. It has to be very precise. It has to be very hard hitting. That means you have to make him look at you and want to hear what you're saying. And it has to be very, very clear. That means he should not have to, try and ask you a question about what you just said. So the conviction and research of your idea will surface automatically if you believe in what you have created. So if you have truly believe in the idea that you have created, your conviction and research will absolutely come out automatically. So some early stage startups today are hiring professional. I mean, I know of startups who are actually, as I told you, through LinkedIn and other platforms, are hiring professional and angel investor matchmakers to fine tune their pitch, and presentation, even their website, how to improve that, and even the valuation and term sheet process. Because a lot of startups don't know how to value what they're doing. So just to summarize, which are the components that a pitch should consist of. Number one, your product name and category has to be very clear. Number two, the problem you are attempting to solve has to be also explicit. Number three, your proposed solution should be very, very crisp. That means whatever you are trying to solve should be completely understood in one sentence. Next, the key benefit of your solution. Now, what are you solving is one thing, but what are the benefits of what you are solving is also very important. Another aspect is the size of your market and scalability. That is very crucial. If you're, restricting your startup to a city or maybe a state, then the scalability stops there. So the size of your market and scalability is very crucial to what you're trying to pitch. And finally, why you as a startup is better than your competition and contemporary products or services of a similar nature. You have to be very, very clear on, and conviction should be there on why you are better. You should be absolutely convinced that you are better. Only then does your idea evoke any interest.
So my next question is from a different point of view. So you have been at the receiving end also of so many pitch decks and things like that. So when you are, and you have just mentioned that when you are sitting somewhere and you are watching, let's say, 50 presentations in a day. So what is the one crucial thing which you think is the deal maker or deal breaker, which you think if that is there, yes, you will say thumbs up to it. And if that is not there, you will say thumbs down to it in terms of either in the terms of content of the presentation or the style of the presentation.
Well, to just answer that question in one sentence, the longevity of the project, of the product or the service. So, if you have a product or a service which is unique, of course, in that case only will you evoke interest. But if it is unique, what is the life cycle of that product or idea? Okay. And even that is very crucial for any business idea to attract any investment.
Yes. So they have to not only discuss about the market size and scalability, but also the life cycle of the product also.
Exactly.
Right. So sometimes people, and you have talked about matchmakers in terms of startup ecosystem also, but sometimes people might not have a very good background of numbers and business models. So how important is it to present the numbers as well as the business model and things like that in the deck, or will an idea in itself will be sold to the investors, or will they say that no, the idea is okay, but we would like to see the exact numbers as well as the kind of model you are adopting and things like that?
Yeah, so again, it comes down to conviction. Let's assume you have a very unique problem-solving idea of a product or a service. So having spent time and researched the idea, you have to be absolutely sure that nobody can drill holes into your idea. That means if your idea is flawed, people will question you and you will be short of answers. That should not be the case. For that, you must go through the process of vetting the idea. Now, this you can do in the initial stages through friends, family, teachers, professors, who have been successfully, or even those startups who have been successfully managing some of the other businesses, or even successful startup founders, as I mentioned earlier, with whom you can connect. Now, there are certain angel investment platforms who also do some hand-holding. There are some in Lucknow also, they're a little fragmented, but they still exist. And you can approach them, and they have professionals who, because it's an angel investment platform, they're always looking for good ideas. And if they see a good idea, but a bad presentation, they always try to improve upon that so that the idea becomes an investable idea. Yes. So let these people, friends, family, angel investment professionals, even startup founders play the devil's advocate and cross-question you on your idea. So this is called vetting. You know, when you vet an idea, you cross-question it as if, as an investor, somebody would. And then you realize where the flaws and the gaps are. But if you are able to honestly address all these questions unflinchingly, that means without batting an eyelid, you are ready to start moving forward. You can be sure that if you were able to convincingly answer, that means you're ready to get into the startup ecosystem. So being thorough is very important.
Yes.
So questions that you need to have confident answers. Now, what are the kind of questions that will be probably asked of you when your startup idea is on the table? Well, first question that are most likely to be asked is, what is the size of the market? As I mentioned earlier, what is the size of the market you're addressing? Again, what is the scalability? And at what stages of your journey do you see that happening? So you should preempt, at which stage of your startup will you start scaling up? If you're starting in a city, you want to scale up to other cities, you want to scale up to a state, you want to scale up to a country. All of that must be, at least some foresight of that must be part of your thought process. So it is also important for the investor to know who is part of your core team and do they share the same vision as you do. So it is very important for your core team to have the same vision. And the composition of your core team should have people who are specialists in their domain. Like example, somebody is a technology facing specialist, somebody is a finance facing specialist, somebody is a legal facing specialist, somebody is a marketing facing specialist. So all these are components of what you are going to do. So your core team must have the same vision and they must be in existence when you create the challenge to get investment. So again, it is important for you to understand how you value your company. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, it's not an easy job to understand when you talk of the financial aspect. You see, startups are valued on value that is futuristic in nature. It's not current values that so you actually preempt the valuation of a company 2 years from now, and then you put that value on the table today. So how you value your company is very important. You have stages of a startup, which is bootstrapping. Then you have pre-seed, and then you have seed, early stage investment. Then you have pre-valuation, and then you have Series A, Series B, and so on and so forth. So you have different stages. And therefore, to value your company right at the initial stage is very critical for you to get that first early stage investment. So also it's very important for you to know when you will turn profitable. This is a question you must have an answer to. You can't say 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, maybe 5 years. You can't say that. You have to be very sure. And that is to be based on a matrix that you have created on the basis of your research.
Yes.
Next question that is likely to be asked is, what is your early and subsequent threshold for investment? So, they might say that investors might say, no, it's very early, we'll come back to us after 6 months. So you should know what is the threshold at which you will want to have that investment. And finally, the most important question they will ask you is, if you get the investment, how do you propose to utilize the investment? Yes. So this is very, very important question that you must have answers to, because today, if you're convinced me about your idea and the growth prospects, and I'm ready to invest, I must know as an investor what you're going to do with that money and how it will actually translate to your goals. So that is crucial.
Yes. So wonderful. You have given us a list of very important questions. One of the question and one of the point which you have raised here is that angel investors will also look at the team formation, the team which you have. So
correct.
While making a team, the team can make and break the idea also. A good idea can also fail if the team formation is not right. So how can an entrepreneur or a person who is having the idea, what are the things they should take care of while they are making the team?
Well, I think, it's all about what product or idea you are creating, because the components of your team will actually be related to the idea you are creating. If it is a manufacturing idea, you must have people who are familiar with the technology of manufacturing that particular product. And of course, there are certain common aspects to every team. One, you must be having a good person to handle finance, who understands valuations, who understands, the profitability cycle of any business. Number two, you must have a legal person, even if not full-time, at least have access to legal advice, because when you approach investors, or when you have even formation of a company, or even compliances, statutory compliances of the government, you need to be understanding the legal aspects of how to run a business. And therefore you must have access to, whether it is, even things like GST, etc. You need professionals and help. So you can get these on a part-time basis, or even on contractual basis, but still these are universal components, finance and legal. But marketing, technology, manufacturing, all of this is specific to the product or idea that you're building.
Yes, yes. So it's very important to choose the right kind of team according to the product and service which you are offering. We have one very good question by Mr. Sushant Prasad, and he is asking about, as we have discussed about startups going into tier 2 and tier 3 cities. He is going a little bit further, and he is asking that how can entrepreneurs emerge from rural areas? And are there some platforms or schemes available for the rural area people to do their own business apart from the traditional work which they have been doing? For example, if they are farming, along with that, if they can. So at macro level, how will this startup culture go into villages which are otherwise very entrepreneurial mindset people?
Yeah, I mean, you see, it's very ironical that a lot of agri-tech and agri-based startups are created in metros, but their customer base is the agricultural sector. So opportunity for startups today in the agri sector is huge, because food processing, agri and agri-tech is a huge part of our GDP. Today, about 20% of our GDP is coming from the agricultural sector, and 60% of our population still resides in the rural sectors. So considering that, the opportunity size is there, and it's not that startups are not happening. I mean, if you do some research on the internet and you see agri-facing or agri-tech based startups, they will find hundreds of them, and they are doing great work in the interiors, in the agricultural and the rural sectors of the country. It's only that the startup creation is not sitting in a village. It's done in some metro where you have a team which is building that entire ecosystem for the agri-based startup. So yes, first, of course, you must understand what are the opportunities in the agri sector. For that, you must see what are the startups that are in existence and what problem they are addressing. So at least your understanding of how a startup can work in an agricultural environment has to be understood. Secondly, the government has just recently created a startup policy where they are giving a lot of support to rural, even backward or less developed parts of the state, where young entrepreneurs, men and women, can approach the government, come up with an idea which is solving a problem, even locally, and the government is ready to fund money. And even SIDBI is involved in this process through certain private agencies, and giving grants and funds for small amounts, 20,000, 50,000 rupees, to rural startup ideas. Again, the government of India's Startup India policy and the Startup India platform, which is you can access the website and understand what are the opportunities. They are also giving you huge opportunities to connect with various matchmakers who can help you evolve your idea, who can point you in the right direction with regard to funds, etc. So there is plenty of things available on the internet. Yes, awareness is important. And even in the rural areas, the opportunity size is huge. So there is no dearth of opportunity.
Yes, yes. So there is certainly no dearth of opportunities, as you have said. And now, at the final stage of today's discussion, I would also like to discuss a little bit which is related to the startup culture itself, which you have also discussed, that parents, they see that my kid is working 24/7, long nights, overnight work is there, and it's not easy to become an entrepreneur in comparison to doing a 9 to 5 job per se. And because of that, a lot of youngsters also start losing grip on their life. In this context, as you have a hobby and a passion for culture, as well as you have a theater group also, and you have worked in one of the web series also. So, what is the importance of creating, and it's very strange, a work-life balance for an entrepreneur also? Because when we talk about work-life balance, we generally talk about people who are doing jobs. But nowadays, since there is a kind of, I would not say rat race, but a lot of pressure to become the unicorn as quickly as possible. So, what kind of advice and what is your point of view on the entrepreneurial life from this aspect also?
Yes, you spoke about rat race. Even in a rat race, the winner is still a rat. So
Yes.
there's no. So no, I do feel that today, thanks to technology, the pace at which we are able to achieve targets is much faster, and therefore, the retirement goals of the younger population today, especially the millennials, is in the vicinity of 45 to 50 years. And that is only possible because you have created enough wealth to help you live the rest of your life the way you want to. And for that, of course, the initial part of your life has to be full of sacrifices, because if you have set goals for yourself, it's a very cutthroat world. It's a very dynamic and fast changing, fast paced world. So to survive, if you've taken the challenge of getting into the startup ecosystem and startup world, or even in professional businesses where there is a lot of push and pull as far as your growth process is concerned, performance is key. Yes, I do believe that there are cases where sheer competition and performance has driven young boys and girls to burnout situations. That means they've ended up as mental wrecks, as physical wrecks at the age of mid 30s or something. So that also should not happen. So being in control of your life is very important. And I mentioned earlier in the earlier part of what I said, that unless you fail, you will not enjoy the success that follows. And that is very, very important, because failure should not be a deterrent. In fact, failure should make you even stronger to overcome the next set of challenges that you want to overcome. And this is very, very important for the life cycle of any human being, in the sense that if you sort of let yourself down or put yourself down after a few failures, then the rest of your life is going to be nothing but sorrowful. But if you overcome failures and are getting ready for the next set of challenges stronger and better, there is no reason why you will not succeed. And this is, if you see case histories of so many successful young entrepreneurs today, a lot of Indians head a lot of corporates in the corporate world at the young age of 30 or 40. And they're heading, I mean, you mentioned even Twitter recently.
Yes.
He's a very young person who is joined. I think he's one of the youngest CEOs in the world today. So all of this is only possible because they did work on dividing their personal and professional life sensibly. So that is very important. And it is for every individual to understand what priorities one needs to give to family, to friends, to yourself. I mean, giving time to yourself is also very important. Because if you're not going to be healthy, if you're not going to be mentally and physically healthy, your journey will be cut short at some point of time.
Yeah.
So you have to create that healthy balance. And it's different for different people.
Yes.
In my case, as you mentioned, I have been working now for 45 years. Not that I've stopped working, but I have slowed down in terms of my pace of working, because I have created, or rather I had planned for this stage of my life about 10 years ago, where I created systems and people and teams to take over my responsibilities. And therefore, I'm sitting here and talking to you. I'm having the time to discuss things with you. If somebody walks into me with a good idea to, have a short theater performance, I'd be happy to do that, because these are all areas where you de-stress. You know, there is something called monotonous approach to work, where you have a 9 to 5 routine, or in startups, there's no time to eat, there's no time to sleep, because the initial part of your journey is 24/7. In fact, every startup starts with a 24/7 routine. So, but at the same time, once you cross certain thresholds, then you should start putting systems in place which will take over certain responsibilities once you have matured to that level and have the confidence in people to do things for you.
Yes, yes. So definitely, as you have rightly said, planning is very important and putting up systems is very important. So thank you very much, Kiranji, because I think we have discussed startup ecosystem from a very unique perspective. We have discussed from the societal perspective also that how it is evolving in the Indian society. Then we have discussed the startup ecosystem from an individual's point of view. And there is a good question coming that, yes, so this is also one of the trends which is not there in India, but which is definitely there in Western world, developed countries, that PGDM students, MBA students, while they are doing their studies also, they can start thinking of doing small startups. But the question which students ask often is the thing of managing time. Although you have answered the question by discussing about the planning stage as well as creating systems, if you would like to quickly answer this question by Aishwarya.
Yeah, I mean, there is no stage in your life where you want to be a part of a particular business idea, or there are people who have worked for 25 years and suddenly given up that great working opportunity just because they were passionate about something else. It could be travel, it could be writing, it could be a startup, it could be anything. So it's that button in your head which clicks on and off at times, and every person is different. Every individual is programmed differently, and it is entirely up to the individual how he wants to conduct his life. Of course, a lot depends on the environment in which he or she grows in, whether it is parents, whether it is family or school or college. So all of this has an influence on that. So I think it's case to case, it's different. It can't, one size cannot fit all. So it's a very individual trait in people, which I think they should follow their instincts and follow their gut feeling. And of course, have the ability to take risks in life. I mean, that is very important. So if you have that, and of course, the passion, which is so crucial behind any idea or any business thought or anything that you do in life, the passion will only drive you to where you want to go.
Yes, yes. So the ability to take risk and being very, very, very passionate are the keys to become a successful person in life as well as a successful entrepreneur also. Thank you very much for being with us and enlightening us with so many wonderful ideas, giving us matrices, checkpoints, and things related to business idea presentation also. Thank you very much, and I hope that students who are watching this dialogue online, and soon it will be on YouTube also, are going to benefit a lot from this dialogue. I think Kiranji is on LinkedIn. I know he is on LinkedIn, and I think he will be very happy to have any kind of dialogue through his LinkedIn profile also. I will share his LinkedIn profile in the YouTube channel's link also, so that if you need any kind of guidance and mentoring related to entrepreneurship and startup, I think he will be happy to share his ideas and mentor and guide you also.
Certainly, always a pleasure, Dr. Sharma, and it was a pleasure being here talking to students, although virtually you can't do justice to an interaction, but still I'm be happy to in any way answer questions if there are at any stage, and if I can help any young minds to evolve into business ideas, business entrepreneurs, it will always be a pleasure.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.